When the adults show up in a way that's safe and exudes safety, young people will gravitate towards that.
An anti-trafficking program can teach warning signs, but it can't replace a caring adult. If a young person doesn't feel seen, safe, and valued, information alone won't protect them. In this episode, I'm talking with Dr. Nanyamka Redmond about how everyday adults, parents, teachers, coaches, neighbors can become a protective factor by building the kinds of relationships that help our young people thrive and navigate risk. Hi, I'm Ruthi Hanchett. I'm part of the Global Center for Women in Justice at Vanguard University, and I'm honored to host today's conversation. Dr. Redmond is a research scientist at the Search Institute, where she focuses on developmental assets, relationship-centered youth development, and resilience. And now, here's our conversation. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ruthi Hanchett. I am a member of the Global Center for Women in Justice at Vanguard University, and I'm an adjunct professor of human trafficking. I am excited to be your guest host today on the Ending Human Trafficking podcast. I am grateful for this opportunity today because I have a guest that I am really excited and want you all to know. Our guest today is Dr. Nanyamka Redmond. She is a research scientist at the Search Institute, a nationally recognized organization dedicated to advancing research and practical frameworks that help young people thrive. She holds a PhD in applied developmental psychology from Fuller Theological Seminary and a master's degree in clinical psychology, marriage, and family therapy from Azusa Pacific University. She will also be serving as our keynote speaker at the Global Center for Women in Justice's conference, Ensure Justice, where she will expand on the role that relationships play in prevention and resilience building among youth. Dr. Redmond, welcome to the Ending Human Trafficking podcast.
Oh, thanks, Ruthi. This is awesome.
I am so happy to have you with us today and connect with you because you and I have a lot of what I would call shared parallel history.
Right.
Yeah, I've been a fan of the Search Institute for many years. I worked for World Vision International from about 2004 to 2013, and we use the Positive Youth Development Assets framework in a lot of our programming around the globe.
That's awesome.
And even now, as a professor, when I teach my classes on human trafficking, I often will bring up the 40 developmental assets as an example of preventative approaches that are focused on youth empowerment rather than just those scary things we want to do to keep kids safe.
Right. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that it's being used in the classroom.
So we have that a little bit of shared history, Dr. Redmond, but I want to start with your beginning story. So tell me a little bit about what drew you first to this idea of studying youth development and the roles that relationships play in helping young people thrive.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And the question that I asked myself when I was about 7 years into teaching as a high school teacher and really have been digging in deeply around these ideas of what the students were bringing to me, right? So my classroom was that classroom that at lunchtime, all the kids were there. I didn't get a lunch to myself. There were always a lot of kids there, and they were coming to me and bringing to me, some pretty heavy things that were outside of the curriculum, things like divorce, and as they're processing their own lives and next steps and things like that. And my hope was that I was giving them what they needed, but I really wasn't sure and wanted to do more to understand both what they needed and to figure out how to get that out into the world. There were so many teachers who were like me. I'm not the only one who had a, lunchtime packed classroom. And so I wanted to think, okay, well, what are the strategies? What are the tools that teachers who are deeply relational and want to be able to step in and intercede and help to see their young people thrive? So it first started in the classroom. It first started in the classroom.
I'm sure you're a great teacher.
I hope so.
Yeah. And that it's great that it started with that curiosity, wanting to do better for your kids. I wonder, was there a point in that journey when you were asking these questions and learning where you came to realize how powerful these positive assets development process or tools were and how that is a prevention strategy?
Yeah, well, I observed a couple things. One, I recognized that all students had this rich capacity for depth, right? So even the students who may have been, appeared to be struggling in academics or any other area, they still had really great strengths. And and so that was there. That's across the board, all the students. And then when as I, been in the field for a while, like I said, I was ended up teaching for 8 years total before I left the field. And in that time, I saw generations of students come through. So students who became adults and then, started their own families. And there were students that, were surprises in terms of how well they were
Hmm.
doing. And then there were students that weren't a surprise. And I did begin to wonder, like, okay, what was it about the ingredients, let's say, that would lead one student to do really well, other students who may not have been doing well, at least within that small time frame, and students who did.
Hmm.
And sort of like my pseudoscience that I did a lot of. I was a psychology teacher, by the way. So
Okay.
I always was interested in both teaching and learning more about these things.
I think that's so great. I've often wondered those same questions, especially in my previous work, working with some kids in really tough situations who have
Mm-hmm.
experienced a lot of trauma, and then working with survivors of human trafficking.
Yeah.
We constantly are asking, what is it that makes
Hmm.
a difference? Where some are incredibly resilient, incredibly brave, and just rise above it,
Yeah.
and others where it can be really crumbling. I think that's the secret we all want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what's the answer? Yeah. It's, yeah. I've got some thoughts, but as we go through our talk together, some things maybe my thoughts will be more revealed during that time.
Okay. Yeah, we all want to know. Well, maybe we
Yeah.
can start with the beginning because I think many of our listeners do work with survivors of human trafficking, or
Hmm.
maybe in education like you, they are teaching or working with young people.
Hmm.
They're in the areas of abuse prevention or advocacy, but they may not be familiar with the concept of the developmental assets. And could you
Hmm.
begin at the beginning and explain for us what the developmental assets are and how they are foundational to our understanding of youth well-being?
Yeah. Oh, so developmental assets, which has been Search Institute's more pioneering work. The 40 developmental assets. It's, Ruthie, you're not the only one that when I go somewhere, people are like developmental assets as soon as they hear
Hmm.
Search Institute. Um, but and those are the folks who know this stuff, who may have known of Search Institute, but as you mentioned, a lot of folks may not know. But developmental assets are um, a combination of internal strengths and external supports that young people need in order to live those great, healthy, safe, thriving lives that we want to see. So after years and years of research, so a lot of work went into the development of the developmental assets. These aren't just like random 40. Like it was a lot of work in what in the research space that then led to these 40 components. And like I would say summatively, they include like supportive relationships, um, boundaries and expectations, social emotional skills, particular identities, or identity understanding of a positive identity formation and a sense of
Hmm.
purpose. Um, and also there's some structural components as well. Like what are they accessing? What do they have access to? What types of communities are included in the external support? So it's not just on the young person and what they have within them,
Hmm.
but also what types of external supports are available to them as well.
I love that. And what I love about this whole entire framework and approach is that we can all play a part in
Yes.
helping to build those, right? I think about that as a mom. I
Hmm.
have two daughters, and I think about, am I giving them opportunities to build those internal assets, to be proud of
Right.
who they are, to contribute to society, to have
Hmm.
power sharing. But
Mm.
also, anyone in a community can ask the question of what are those external assets and how can I build them up or contribute so that there's more for our young people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that as a parent of three boys.
Hmm.
It's the same idea. It's the same thing as you just described. It's like, what can I do, but also what can we all do, right? It's as a
Hmm.
parent raising children today is it's a lot. And so it doesn't have to all be on you. It's being able to look at the web of connection, the support ecosystem that we like to talk about at Search Institute is so vital. And although the maybe quote unquote, parents may indirectly or directly put the pressure on themselves, it really isn't. It really is the village raises the kid, that concept, and looking at the assets and as well as developmental relationships, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure, are all really critical components. So, but it doesn't have to be on one person or even one structure. It's all that feeds into the ecosystem.
Well, I wonder if you would tell us a little bit more, maybe personal, as a parent. What have you done to intentionally build those assets, that village around your kids? What does that look like? How do you make choices in the way that you realize it's not just all on you, but creating opportunity for your kids to benefit from those opportunities?
Yeah, I drive myself wild sometimes in that, as Ruthie, I'm sure you know as well as a parent, like sometimes there's a point where you can know too much. And so you're like deep diving into everything. But one of the things is like just being intentional and strategic about who pours into my kids. So choosing the right fit of a sports program or the right tutor or music teacher or something along those lines where you're like, not just that this person is really good at what they do, but they really get kids or they get my kids who have unique strengths and things that they're working through. So wanting to really find that matchup, which sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. So then you're able to pivot. So that's another part of parenting is being like, oh, you know what? We thought this was the right idea and it's not. So being able to make those choices, but ultimately it's to build around your youngsters people who have the values, the understanding of who they are that equals yours so that you can have them pouring into them so that they're not getting competing messages or things that have kids get confused around like oh well my mom said this but you said that, and it's like getting everybody on the same page as much as possible because ultimately my kids will grow up and they're littles right now, but when they're teenagers, especially, as I'm sure some of the listeners are probably parents of teenagers, kids still listen to you, but it's a different way of listening. They will have peers and they will have far more autonomy than when they did when they were little. And you want them to choose folks that are gonna help their thriving versus thwart it. So starting young is one way to do that.
That's great. I know when we speak to parents a lot through the Global Center, we talk about protection, making sure that they're safe, that they're going to have your child's best interest at heart. But this is that next level where it's like they're going to invest in your kid and be the kind of role model that you want rubbing off on your child too, right? Yeah. And I know my mama's heart when I see somebody that sees my kid for who they are and values them. It makes me so grateful, right? Because we think our kids are wonderful. Yeah. But when teachers or coaches or, other aunties and adults in their lives see them for who they are and love them, it is such a gift.
It really is. It is a gift.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This brings us to this idea of developmental relationships, right? And how young people benefit from them. I know your research has really highlighted how critical developmental relationships are as drivers of these assets internally, especially for kids. So could you define what a developmental relationship is and what makes those unique and powerful in shaping how young people grow and navigate risk especially?
Yeah, wow. Developmental relationships are more than just good relationships. I think across the board, we all understand good relationships and kids having access to good or healthy relationships are a good thing. This takes it a little bit deeper in saying, yes, that's true, but what are the ingredients or what are the elements of a good relationship that research has shown to directly impact those outcomes that we want to see or prevent the things we don't want to see, as you're mentioning, Ruthie. And so what we found is that there's these 5 elements that are critical to a developmental relationship. And I'll try to move through them quickly, but they are express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, and expand possibilities. So each of these 5 elements go into the factor, if you want to look at it from a scientific side, the factor of developmental relationships. And any one interaction that accompanies one of those elements is a good thing for a young person. So a teacher often finds themselves in a space of challenging growth, which is supporting a young person to believe that they can do hard things.
Mm-hmm.
The coaches as well. And in fact, those are some of the highest rated elements. When you ask students about their experience in school, they'll often say challenge growth, and they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also things like express care. Expand possibilities is one that we've found for adults to be a little bit hard. Not that expand possibilities means that that the adult helps to share or shape a vision for a future that could be available to a young person. And I think the challenge there is you've got to really know a kid really well to know
Mm-hmm.
what's going to expand the possibility for them.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
simply saying,
excite them about it.
exactly. Simply saying, "Oh, you could be a doctor." It's like, "Oh, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be, I want to be this
Mm-hmm.
other thing." And so you're thinking you're expanding a possibility, but it's not necessarily related to what they want. But so those are the five things that accompany a developmental relationship. And your question around like um, how does this reduce risk or elevate prevention? It's having adults who are impacting at each of these different levels helps to help a young person develop a sense of self that is confident, that is positive, because there's this external adult who, in some cases, didn't raise me,
Mm-hmm.
who believes in me and can see a future for me and is willing to walk through whatever I'm going through, elbow to elbow, and to give me power in decision making. Um, and so these are really critical elements, and I think they are deeply preventative in terms of um, of creating spaces and relationships that are, how do you say, protective. That's the best way
Mm-hmm.
I can say it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if we could dig in a little bit because a lot of us work in this space with survivors of human trafficking or youth that are very vulnerable, have a lot of risks, right? And oftentimes it's because home hasn't been a safe place, right?
Right.
Or they've experienced abuse and trauma, which is oftentimes something that we see as a precursor to then sexual exploitation as children.
Yes.
So what does this look like when we think about developmental relationships, especially when you brought up that idea of not necessarily the person that raised you? How can adults be those positive developmental relationships, especially for kids that maybe are at higher risk of human trafficking or sexual abuse or really need that positive relationship in their life?
Well, for one, for many kids who've experienced trauma, relationships have been just transactional, right? If that even, right? Like it's not deep, it's not meaningful, it's been harmful. So the experiencing of someone who cares for them without there being strings attached is one very, how do you say it? It's surprising sometimes
Mm-hmm.
where it can be hard for them to really open up and receive the care or the support because so often it hasn't been there without some sort of a strings attached. And so I tell people who are like, well, what happens? I'm trying with this young person and I'm just not breaking through. Is I just keep trying,
Mm.
and it doesn't have to be grand, how do you say, grand ideas or grand shows of care or support. It could be just the little things,
Mm.
and it takes time, sometimes a lot of time, to break through some of those barriers. But it does happen, and these are, just five very key elements to break through and overcome truly unfortunate situations that young people have experienced.
Mm. Yeah. I have a lot of colleagues who are more on the therapy side who talk about uh, therapeutic relationships and how
Yes.
oftentimes trauma happens because people have hurt us and we heal when people are connected and loving, right? And how critical those relationships can be. So thank you, yeah, for thinking about how they can be both healing but also preventative as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, when we think about, parents, educators, those youth serving professionals, what are some of those practical ways that we can intentionally foster these developmental relationships that both help prevent and protect young people, but strengthen their resilience? What can we do as adults that want to be a part of this?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, like sometimes it's the small things, right? Micro moments of care, right? Like
Hmm.
learning a young person's name, learning their name and connecting with them around not just their name, but like what interests them.
Mm.
And sometimes it's hard to know, right? You see a young person and they're alone. You may just want to find a point of connection, like, oh wow, I see you reading this book. I've read that book before. Or the other day, I saw a little girl at a clinic that we were running, and she just had like the cutest little outfit, and it was like pink, and I was like, I really like your outfit. You think they make one in my size? And she just giggled and ran off. But and again, I only saw her for a little bit, but someone having an opportunity um, to connect in these small moments, these small opportunities. Um, and like I said, I was a teacher before, and I know that that could be hundreds of kids that in which one teacher may be impacting. And often we hear from teachers like, "How am I supposed to connect with all of these kids?" It's like, well, sometimes it's not connecting with every single one on a daily basis, but it's making effort to connect
Hmm.
with the five or the ones that seem like they're most at risk, and being able to have those connections. I think that those are really key or more practical micro moments starting there. I can go into like more complex things, but like I said, I think starting with the micro
Hmm.
moments of care, I think are really critical because folks don't have a lot of time to do all the things.
Mm. And I think all of us can probably remember our childhoods.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
adult that told us we were special, that we had potential, that gave us that care, and it sticks, right?
Yeah, yes, definitely.
I can remember Mrs. Foote in first grade who encouraged me in my reading.
Yeah, yeah. There's so and I think there's another like opportunities of like normalizing help seeking, right? I think that's
Mm.
another piece, and sometimes it's just consistently asking someone like, do you need anything? You got anything? And it's like, oh, and then when they're saying, I'm okay, I'm good, and you see them struggling, just being like, how can I, let me help you with this just a little bit. Let me
Mm.
offer this as an opportunity. You want to come to this tutoring session I'm having, whatever that is, and kind of opening access
Hmm.
to making it okay to say I'm not okay. And that's a bit harder, but when the adults are safe,
Hmm.
when the adults show up in a way that's safe and exudes safety, young people will gravitate towards that.
Well, I want to ask about how schools can create
Mhm.
and foster an environment where these kind of developmental relationships can take place. I think about a lot of schools and community serving organizations that work with young people. I think they've
Hmm.
realized the importance of what we would call culturally responsive practices, building
Hmm.
safe places of belonging. But
Hmm.
those ideals can sometimes be elusive. They can be
Sure.
buzzwords we throw around without
Yeah.
really understanding how to do it. So,
Hmm.
for you as a researcher, can you break down a little bit more about what that looks like, feels like? Give us some
Hmm.
concrete ways that we can try to create this kind of culture where developmental
Yeah.
relationships take place.
Go back to this idea of belonging, right? What belonging communicates to the young person is that I'm seen, I'm valued. I don't have to be small in the spaces or the opportunities that I'm with this person. So when you start there with this idea that we want all young people to belong, particularly in spaces that are meant for them, like schools, right?
Hmm.
Um, that they do belong in those spaces. And so how do we help them to feel seen and valued in particular? That really encapsulates that the concept of belonging in those spaces. And doing that may often be dependent on the young person who's on the other side of the receiving. So for some kids who have always felt like they belonged, not a problem. they could just slide on in there. They know they're seen, they know their value. That's not a problem. But for other kids who either have been directly communicated that you don't belong here for a host of reasons, or a young person who just feels like they don't fit into the space, helping them to understand their belonging is much more complicated. So helping them to feel seen means kind of wading through the clutter to know why they don't feel seen. What has happened to them directly or indirectly within the system that expresses to them that, maybe this isn't the right space for you. So with on top of my mind, because I've got 3 kiddos and each with different learning capacities and needs, for kids who have learning differences, for example, school may have often been a place where they have felt insecure because they don't learn like everybody else. So then how does the system, how can it be responsive to help that young person know that they are seen and valued and belong? Well, that may be by providing adequate supports, so that they feel like, okay, you get me, or helping them to feel seen by having a curriculum that directly leads to more acceptance of learning differences. And that's just one example. There could be a host more depending on a young person's national identity or language or any of these things that help that by focusing on belonging, the young person gets a sense of dignity versus deficit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think it makes me wonder about one of the other 5 pillars of power sharing, right?
Yes.
So when you mention that belonging, it really can come down to asking those kids what makes you feel like you belong or don't belong in this space. So talk about what it looks like. How would, especially on a systematic level, how would a school ask those questions? How would a school get to know who feels like they belong? How do we share that power so we're hearing from the young people?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of I can give you some really strategic and examples of some of the things that some of the projects I'm currently working on. One of which is coming out of in support of a team based out of Minnesota, and they have a really great mission of wanting to open up voice and access to the students all throughout the Twin Cities. And so in doing that, they are creating spaces and listening opportunities. So they're helping to work with schools that are saying, hey, we want to know more about how our students are feeling. So making space, that's one simple way of being able to say, okay, how do we make space and opportunity to hear the young people, and doing so with great intentionality. So not just like, hey, kid, what do you think about this? But
fill the survey out and be done.
Right. Yeah, fill the survey out, move on. But to actually say, okay, we're going to host over the next few months, once a week, we're going to host these sessions where we want to hear from you, and then let them lead that. So even before the adults come and say, hey, we have questions, I'm a researcher, I've been that person who's been like, hey, young people, tell me what you think. But to actually go a few steps before that to say, young person, help me to craft the questions, or just or the young person being able to have access to the adults to say, hey, these are the questions that I have, but you run this infrastructure. How do we partner together? You with the power for infrastructure, me with the young person with the desire to learn more about what my peers are thinking, and then working together. But I'll add a caveat to that, as I know many adults are probably thinking, or at least I know I have at some point, of sometimes they come up with some wacky things, right? Young people will they will shoot for the stars, which I love about youth, honestly. They will shoot for the stars and not think about all the different barriers to the stars. They're just I'm there. And so that can be tricky to navigate as an adult. However, know that you are an adult. You probably have more experience in some ways. They may know their experience better than you do, but you may know what those different barriers are. So gently ask them, okay, so I hear that, don't squash it, but how can we overcome these different things that are going to prevent us from reaching that star point?
Hmm.
And let's talk it through. So sometimes you have to keep them a little down to earth a little bit, but don't squash the dreams.
Absolutely. I think it's about transparency and those expectations, listening, and then bringing your resources to join them in that process, right?
Yes, definitely.
Well, I'm excited because you are going to be our keynote speaker for Ensure Justice, our conference that's coming up right now. It's this year. It's Friday, March 6th here in Costa Mesa, and our theme is resilient and ready to lead. So
Yes.
I'm wondering, thinking about what you're doing in Minnesota and this particular moment in history, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think it is that the people coming, the professionals, the advocates, the community leaders, what are you excited to share with us? What do we need to hear at this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about resilience. I think one of the big like takeaways there is that resilience is relational, right? Like and resilience isn't solely on the individual in terms of like, hey, Ruthie, build up your own resilience, right? Like if resilience is relational, then really being able to internalize and understand for the adults this idea that the ways in which I connect with a young person is building resilience. It's giving them the strengths, the thriving that we want to see, and also recognize that it's not automatic. It's long term. It happens over time. It happens not just with one person, but again, multiple people within ecosystems. Um, because we know that we those of us who have lived a little bit, right, know that life is hard.
Hmm.
That you will encounter things that are beyond your control. Um, and we want our young people to know that as well, but also to know that there is strength within them and strength outside of them that they can lean on.
Mm,
So
that's a
that would
great
be
message.
one of the big pieces. I think a little snippet of of what I'll be
Hmm.
sharing in the keynote for this conference.
I love that. One more question I want to ask you.
Hmm.
Many adults want to support young people as leaders,
Yes.
but they may be unsure how to do that effectively. What does it
Mm.
look like, or what does it meaningful adult support for youth leadership look like? And how can adults create that space for youth to raise their voice, to share power, while
Mm.
also ensuring that they're safe in that process?
Yeah. Well, one, I think sharing power without abandoning guidance, right? So don't just
Mm.
throw the young person out there to, figure it out. Like, yes,
Hmm.
let them figure it out. Don't go and rescue them all the time, but there should still be some guidance there.
Hmm.
And even actually, let me go back one step before that point, which I think is still critical. But it often begins with ourselves and how do we interpret youth, right? How do we interpret just youth in general? There's a lot of messages out there right now. Um, Actually, let me go back even a step before that. But Search Institute and others were great pioneers in this idea called positive development.
Hmm.
It was a direct response to this idea that the teenage years are horrible. It's so bad. It's like, let's just skip over, go from childhood to adulthood. Let's forget about
Hmm.
the
Buckle
adolescence,
up,
right?
parents. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And when positive development, the concept came about, it was like, well, no, let's look at youth and adolescence for what's going great as well during that time. So
Hmm.
shifting the narrative, shifting the idea, and that's I'd say the umbrella in which I received my training.
Hmm.
So I think we have to ask all adults who work with young people have to ask themselves, how am I interpreting what this period of time looks like for young people? Because if I'm only believing in this storm and stress model, if I'm only believing that adolescence is a horrible period of development, then I'm probably not going to approach my young people with the right frame of mind to be able to see their full picture. So when you instead see adolescence as this, as Larry Sternberg calls it, the age of opportunity, right? See it as this is a time period in which there is great discovery, rapid brain development that comes with so many amazing strengths. Then you can enter into relationships of sharing power and guiding with a frame of understanding that's going to actually elevate the young person. So being able to relinquish some power for adults is hard. I've had adults say, like, "Well, you don't understand what I'm dealing with some of these kids." That's like, okay, well, I'm not telling them to take over your classroom, right? I'm not telling you to like throw out your lesson plans. I said sometimes it's incremental steps. Sometimes it's working with what you have to accomplish for a day to meet certain objectives, and being able to say, okay, can I effectively teach this concept by letting a young person do it instead, giving them an opportunity to do it. So maybe that's what it looks like in the classroom setting. But in other settings, it's, hey, I'm going to give you an opportunity to take over for me. You still the stage, you go for it, and being able to appropriately support while they're doing that. That's just a start.
It's a great start. Yeah. I love it. As a parent, I know I've had a lot of conversations where I'll say, okay, we need to accomplish A, B, and C. Yeah. You tell me what your idea of how we're going to get there, right? And having it be a collaborative conversation to share that power, even though we got to get these things done or get to this point, but how we get there can very much be about shared power.
Oh yeah, definitely. And for parents, it's are we having spaghetti or are we having, chicken tonight? Like those are actually really simple ways of sharing power for parents in particular. So we're having spaghetti or we're gonna have chicken.
Yeah. I was thinking about even right now, I think we're seeing a lot of youth leadership rising up in our communities around, you were talking about the work you're doing in Minnesota. Great examples around the country where kids are leading the way in many places. Standing up for themselves and for others in their community to keep them safe. So I find it inspiring on days where the world can feel discouraging. I find it particularly inspiring to see our kids leading the way.
Definitely. Like I said, they sometimes don't see the boundaries that we see and instead just see the opportunity, which I think is great.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been a pleasure, and it's just the beginning taste of what we're going to get when we make it to Ensure Justice on March 6th. We are so looking forward to having you as our keynote speaker that day, as well as a workshop host, because everyone will have a chance to hear from you, as well as the choice to dig in even more during one of the workshops that you're going to be hosting for us. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ruthi. Appreciate the opportunity.
Big thanks to Dr. Nanyamka Redmond for this powerful reframing. Resilience is relational. It isn't something young people have to build on their own. It grows when adults create belonging and keep showing up with care. Listeners, if you love this conversation, make sure you check out our website at endinghumantrafficking.org for lots more in-depth show notes and other resources. And if you'd like to help us grow this podcast, you can start by sharing this episode with someone and connecting with us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And as always, thank you for listening.